For 28 years, Princeton University paid scientists to find out if you could move dice with your brain. I'm not joking. This was a real lab in a real Ivy League school funded with real money. And what they found either proves something insane about human consciousness or it's the biggest, well, actually, in science history. Stick around, because the ending of this story is wilder than the experiment itself. So picture this. It's 1979, Princeton School of Engineering, and the dean, a guy named Robert Yon, who's not some fringe weirdo. He's an actual respected aerospace engineer who worked on rocket propulsion. Gets approached by a student. The student wants to do a research project on whether people can mentally influence machines. Most students would say, absolutely not, and quietly walk away. Jan said, let's build a lab for this. And that's how the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, PEAR for short, was born. Now, before you assume this was some guy in his garage with a Ouija board, Princeton gave this lab real funding, real equipment, and it ran for almost 3 decades. That's longer than some entire academic department survived. So either Princeton was incredibly committed to a joke, or somebody up top genuinely thought this was worth investigating. Here's basically what they did. They built machines called random number generators, RNGs. Think of it like an electronic coin flipper that spits out random ones and zeros over and over thousands of times. Then they'd sit a person down in front of it and say, just think about getting more ones than zeros. Don't touch anything. Don't do anything physical. Just want it. And then they'd record the results. This is called micro-PK, or micro-psychokinesis. Basically, can your mind nudge truly random events, even by a tiny amount? Sounds like a party trick, right? Here's where it gets interesting. After analyzing literally millions of trials, and I mean millions, this wasn't a weekend study, they found something. A statistically significant deviation from chance. Now hold that thought, because statistically significant is about to become the most important phrase in this entire video. But wait, it gets weirder. They didn't stop at dice and number generators. PEAR also ran something called the Remote Perception Program, basically a fancier, more academic version of remote viewing. One person would go to a random location somewhere in the world. Another person, sitting in a lab at Princeton, would try to describe what the location looked like before being told where it was. They did hundreds of these trials. And, again, they claim results above what you'd expect from random guessing. At this point, you're probably thinking one of two things. Either, okay, this is actually kind of cool, or this sounds like the setup to a debunking video. Hold both thoughts. We're getting there. Let's talk about the guy actually running the day-to-day experience, because this is where it gets personal. Robert Yon ran the lab, but the lab manager, the person actually overseeing thousands of these trials for decades, was a woman named Brenda Dunn. She had a background in developmental psychology, and she was meticulous, like borderline obsessive about controls and protocols. This wasn't two guys vibing in a basement. This was run with the rigor of an actual lab, complete with peer-reviewed publications. And that's actually the most important detail in this whole story, because PEAR's papers got published in real, legitimate scientific journals, not tabloids, not blogs that didn't exist yet, actual peer-reviewed journals, which means other scientists had to look at this data and decide, is this real? And that's exactly what happened. In 1988, a major scientific body did a deep review of PEAR's work to settle the question once and for all. What they found split the scientific community in a way that's still being argued about today. Okay, quick context. Check before we go further. Quick context check before we go further. Because I need you to understand why this matters so much. Here's the thing about flipping a coin, or a random number generator. 1,000,000 times. If you do something 1,000,000 times, even a tiny bias, like 1 in 10,000, starts to look statistically significant on paper. Critics of PEAR pointed out that the effects they found were incredibly small. We're talking deviations of like 50.02% instead of 50%. Microscopic. The big question became, is that tiny number proof of the mind affecting matter? Or is it proof that if you run any experiment enough times, you'll eventually find some tiny anomaly just by random chance, or because of some flaw nobody noticed? This is actually a huge debate in science generally, not just PEAR. It's called the multiple comparisons or p-hacking problem, and it shows up in everything from psychology studies to medical research. So which was it for PEAR? Did they find a real effect, or did they just run the experiment so many times that randomness started looking like a pattern? This is where the story takes its final, almost poetic turn. Let's fast forward to the year 2000. After 28 years of operation, PEAR shut down, officially. Robert Young retired, and Princeton, politely but firmly, did not replace him or continue the lab's funding. Now here's the thing. Princeton was always a little awkward about PEAR's existence. It was never something the university bragged about. Other physics and psychology departments at Princeton reportedly weren't thrilled to have this lab operating under the university's name because, fair or not, it gave skeptics ammunition to question Princeton's scientific seriousness. When PEAR closed, the dean of engineering school at the time gave a pretty diplomatic quote, basically saying that the lab had run its course and that science had moved in other directions. Translation: if you're reading between the lines, it was time to let this one go quietly. But here's the part that I think is actually the most fascinating, and most people miss it. PEAR's data and methodology didn't just disappear. The International Consciousness Research Laboratories, a group that essentially continued some of this research, kept some of these ideas alive. And to this day, researchers in fields like parapsychology and consciousness studies still cite PEAR's massive data set because, love it or hate it, almost 20 years of data on millions of trials is generally rare in any field. Mainstream science, for the most part, looks at PEAR as a cautionary tale about statistics, sample sizes, and how easy it is for well-meaning, intelligent people to convince themselves they found something, especially when they want to find it. But here's the question that PEAR never really answered, and honestly, nobody has. If a respected engineering dean at one of the best universities in the world thought this was worth 28 years and millions of dollars, was he chasing nothing? Or did he just ask a question that science still doesn't have the tools to fully answer? Either way, for almost 3 decades, there was a room at Princeton where people sat along with a machine trying to will reality to bend just a little. And honestly, I kind of want to know what would happen if you tried it. If you want me to break down another real science that sounds fake story, let me know in the comments, because I've got a list, and it's getting weirder from here. Also, if you have the time, like and subscribe, and check out my links in the description. You just might find something there that interests you also. Thank you. Good night.